So as I'm up here today, it's really all about you. And I'll share a little bit about my story, but hopefully you can get some insights and tips to purposefully chase your dreams. So my journey started out in one of the best places in London. Can anyone guess? Just shout out. Where's that? Not Ruislip, definitely not. Anywhere else? South London? Oh, I love it. Peckham, you've done your research. So now it's known for rooftop bars, if any of you have been, new artisan coffee shops popping up on every other corner. For me, the biggest thing was actually seeing a Nando's, because you all know it's not cheeky anymore. And seeing them open that up was interesting. But that's when I knew when the gentrification really kicked in. But for me, growing up, Peckham was a concrete jungle. And as a kid, there was me, my mum, who worked multiple low-paid and menial jobs as she kind of came from Nigeria. And there was my older brother. He was 4 years older than me. And I guess we were surrounded by all the vices that you can imagine, whether it be violence, alcohol abuse, drug abuse. And at the age of 14, my brother was forcibly imprisoned for murder and about 5 other charges. So at that point, I guess I was thinking, what do I do? What's next? But also, 2 of his friends, unfortunately, were sentenced to 30 years to life. And that's longer than many of us have lived, in front of me, anyway. And I guess the real cause of that was poverty. And I saw there was a lack of access to opportunities, for the most part, which often led to, in my case, many people leaving their bikes to rust in their gardens. And I essentially just took it upon myself to fix their bikes. I sent my mum the link. I used to actually use her money, taking money from her purse to fix those initially. So if you're watching this, I'm sorry. But for other kind of times, that actually turned into my first side hustle. And that's where I started to get my pocket money to actually do everything that I was doing. And I guess that love for 2 wheels eventually translated into 4 wheels, and I started go-karting. And that track, which was my local track at the time, eventually closed down. So that dream of karting was pretty short-lived, but if I'm honest, I'm not sure I was a Verstappen or Hamilton anyway. But ultimately, that was kind of where I could express myself, and that dream also came to an end. But what I said to myself at that point was that if I can't be inside of the car in a race, then I'll be outside of the car and help to build it. So that was my main motivation, to combine my different interests that I had and the things that I cared about in a very practical way, and work on the most kind of promising problems. So since then, I've described myself as a humanitarian engineer, as was mentioned, and my mission is really to help people, on the most pressing problems that are in society in a way that centers people and the planet. So that's kind of my why and almost what has brought me here today. So I guess I do this in 3 main ways, and you'll start to see how this links. So the first one started out in 2015. I realized that many of my friends at the time that I grew up with in Peckham were being kicked out. And that was in year 9 or year 10, and they never really had access to the opportunities that I had now started to get hands on, essentially. And I saw a problem, which is a key thing. There's always a problem that you're going to see as you go out into the world every single day. And for me, I kind of saw that as a problem, and I knew, just based upon the values that I was brought up with, that it's important that I leave everywhere better than I found it. So it was at that point that I met my co-founder, Motivez, in Peckham Burger King. See Peckham coming up again. And, we kind of launched Motivez at that time, which is, as mentioned, supported thousands of young people into STEM every single year. And our whole mission is around producing change makers. And we just celebrated our 8th year anniversary. But for the second hat that I wear, it came after graduating. So literally straight after I had finished. And I was kind of interning at places such as Google, McKinsey, and Rolls-Royce, where, again, I spotted problems. And then I got an email from someone called Lewis Hamilton. Anyone know Lewis Hamilton? Show of hands. Yeah, someone said, well, I love that. Got a supporter. And I initially thought that was spam, because he's got no business emailing me, as I thought at the time. But he reached out to me because he kind of heard about my work, and he wanted me to join the board of the Hamilton Commission. But from that point, I was like, there's another opportunity here. So I created an opportunity that eventually, from that first meeting, led me to join his race team and race around the world with this electric racing team to raise awareness of climate change in the most remote locations around the world. So think of places like Greenland with glaciers that are melting at an ever faster rate. Think of places like Senegal that have plastic pollution, or places like Chile where you have one of the driest deserts in the world. And for me, my lips have never been drier being on that stage or being at that race. So there's been a lot of different environments that we've kind of been to, but we essentially take our electric SUV and superimpose it on those problem areas in order to raise awareness. And I started off as a junior engineer, and then went on to a performance engineer the following year, and then a race engineer. So now running that team. So now I guess I spend half of the time working on Motivez and half of the time in motorsport, just for context. And lastly, in my spare time, on the board of the Hamilton Commission and Co-Op Foundation, which allows me to improve diversity in STEM and beyond. And that's really to ensure that those coming up behind me don't have to experience exactly what I experienced, because there's, I guess, there's nothing found in doing that, other than me having regrets for not doing anything about it. So I've essentially helped to raise and given out millions of pounds. And for me, that's probably been the most fulfilling part of the journey. But why do I share all of this, and what does it have to do with you? So there's two main things I would like you to take away, and it's kind of all linked. So the first is to explore what gives you energy. And just think of the analogy of a cup, if you're tracking with me. And just think about what inspires you, what makes you dream, what kind of builds your creativity. And for me, it was found in communities that I was serving in, such as my church or One Young World. So you heard Paul Pullman speaking up on the video earlier, and he's a person I actually met at One Young World and got a chance to spend time with. And again, that was something that filled me and showed me how I could essentially live my career, or live and do my career with a lot more purpose. And then eventually that's how Lewis actually found out about me. So just being in the very spaces that give you energy and fill you up often leads to opportunities. And it's just places where you can essentially fill your cup. So be around people and places that fill you. And the second, and probably the most important, is to be in places and explore where you can give your energy. So as your cup starts to overflow and you start to get a lot more, you'll realize that it can start to spill over into other places. So what communities can you support, and where can you share your enthusiasm that you've built up over the course of the last few years doing your undergraduate and now postgraduate? So for me, I guess there was a time when I nearly gave up on that motorsport dream. So I made it sound very smooth sailing, but in a lot of ways, I was trying to pursue motorsport. In my first year, I volunteered with a Formula student team. In my second year, I led the junior team. In my third year, I was rejected. And that is typically the route that you take if you're trying to go into motorsport. So ultimately, that was essentially being closed off for me at that point. But what I've gone and done after that, once I've now been in a position where I could do something, was ensure that every single team has access now to a rookie mechanic or a junior engineer, so that they can join the teams and travel around the world with me and my peers and all the other teams to ensure that they can get an experience, especially for ones that wouldn't otherwise be able to have access to it. And that was from someone that was rejected from his Formula student team. Many of those people, I'm not sure exactly if they're in motorsport either. So you never know how it's going to turn out, so you can never look down on anyone. And I think after that, the main thing that I kind of saw was that the truth is, though doubt, is there, doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. And that's one thing that I learned kind of on that journey, because I went from doing everything in my first year to the second year winning the championship. So how do you go from being rejected to then winning the championship? It's by that resilience and sticking to it. And the most selfish thing that you can do is really help someone else. Because that's where, I guess, on my journey over the last few years is where I found most of the joy actually is. And it's not really so much about how much you have, but it's about what you do with what you have. So what you do with this master's that you've now managed to achieve. So I guess you're on the hilltop now, but you've now got an opportunity to reach out, reach back to communities that you come from or those that you don't come from, and find a way to actually support them as well as you kind of go along that journey. So some of you have done business, finance, entrepreneurship, marketing, and otherwise. Some of you might have more money than others, some might have more kindness, some more love, but it's thinking about how you can use these qualities and give them back to environments that need them the most. So in short, what spaces can you start to serve? And another reason why that's important, because in 2014, I didn't realize either why I would want to go along this journey, but I was at a youth leadership conference, and they were speaking about writing an obituary. And at that time, I thought it was pretty dark. And it kind of hit me that nobody remembers the richest person in the room. Nobody remembers the richest person that died yesterday. So it was like, is that the most important thing? Probably not. One day it's Jeff Bezos, another day it's Elon Musk. I can't even keep count, so I don't even look. But after all, it's all kind of fleeting, and ultimately it will change, as mentioned before. Change is inevitable. So you might remember the person that had the biggest impact on your life. That's a bit harder to forget. So that's hopefully what all of you in this room can leave doing, having an impact on people's life, and ultimately all the resources that you need in order to continue to do that will come, as long as you keep that top of mind. So one quote that I've kind of always has always stuck with me has been, what people say about you when you leave is a testament to the legacy you leave behind. So what would people say when you're not in the room? And that is probably one of the biggest things that we can kind of focus on. Remember the story I told you about my brother? So he was eventually acquitted halfway through that trial at the Old Baileys, which is often unheard of. And he came out traumatized, as he would be, after being in Feltham Youth Prison. And he did his A-levels in there and managed to pass and come out with a full tuition scholarship. And I guess his name at that point, because he was 18, could be in the news. So in a lot of ways, it was tarnished. If you typed his name, George Imafidon, there wasn't much positive things to actually say. There was all these news articles that were speaking about him essentially being in prison for murder and many other things. But he's gone on to create a multi-million-pound company and has recently shared his story in a book called That Peckham Boy. I think you get the trend. You see how much we have love for Peckham, right? And what for me has inspired me the most is not necessarily the company that he's built, which I think is so impressive, but it's actually his character and how many lives he's touched and how many people he's given hope to on the journey. And that often comes from adversity. When you all go through something and you come out on the other end, that is going to inspire someone, whether that's a breakup or something else. There's always some lesson to be learned and to share with somebody else. And that's essentially what he's done, whether it's impacting people on the inside of prison or on the outside. That's essentially what he's focused on. And in my case, I guess I received an MBE for services to young people in STEM. And that's going to be from King Charles. I'll be going to collect the medal in October. And till now, I still don't know who's nominated me. No clue. But my job right now is to use my platform in the best way that I know now to show that you're never too young to serve, you're never too young to lead, you're never too young to make an impact, and to really advocate for people that don't necessarily see themselves in these rooms. And I guess I received it not because of how much we've made. There's a lot of companies that have made considerably more than we have, but it's because of the people that we've helped over the last 8 years on this journey. So I think that for me was probably the point where it was like, it's all starting to make sense and it's all starting to come together. Even without the recognition, I would have felt that. So for you, as you leave today, I'd like you to think about how you can integrate purpose into everything that you do, as Paul Pullman just mentioned, and just realize that it's not just this fancy add-on that we like to do in addition to our work. Because if you're building a company, for example, that's why a lot of people end up joining, because of the purpose of the organization. So I think it's important to try and integrate that as much as you can and try and use your circle of influence to actually drive change. And I think it was mentioned earlier as well that there's no point in playing safe. or playing it safe, because nothing in life is really worthwhile without taking the risk. And Nelson Mandela once said, "There's no passion found in playing small and settling for a life less than you're capable of living." It's a fact that you're going to fail. You will lose at times post this, which might sound somber, but it's the reality. And people will mostly remember the home runs. Who watched the England and Spain game yesterday with the women? Show of hands. There's a lot of us. And until now, I can't tell you how much time Spain has lost, but I can tell you, unfortunately, that they've definitely won one now. But ultimately, that's what people are going to remember, and that's just what resilience allows you to essentially achieve. So it's just most important to just keep going on that journey. And in the real world, you're going to fail, and if you don't fail, you're not trying. And you may have failed some modules on the course, maybe you failed some job applications that you've done already, but ultimately that's not the end. When I was applying for Spring Weeks, I got rejected from everywhere other than one company, and that was the company that I actually wanted. So there was no indication of my worth through those rejections. I agree. And as big as this moment is, don't really let it define you. Let this not be your biggest highlight. And that was when I was sitting in my seat, that's what I was thinking. Like, this is not going to be the biggest thing that I've done in my life. This is not going to be the biggest impact, and there's more to come. So, graduating class of 2023, here's my mission for you. Never be discouraged, never hold back, give everything you've got, and when you fall, remember that this is a marathon. So keep moving and serve your way to the top. Congratulations, I love you all. Bless you, the marathon continues.